The Manzini Magistrates Court in the Kingdom of Eswatini has dismissed the application by the defense to postpone the extradition application of Siyabonga and Malusi Ndimande for oral arguments on safety-related issues. They alleged that they had to skip South Africa due to taxi violence that claimed the lives of some of their relatives. Dismissing the application, Magistrate David Khumalo says the defense has failed to provide evidence to substantiate the claims that Malusi was at a boarding school or hospital when Keenan, aka Forbes, and Tibz Murder were murdered. Magistrate Khumalo ordered the state and the defense to immediately continue with the main extradition judgment on whether the two suspects will be granted extradition is set for August 16. While our reporter, Nhlanhla Jele, has more on the story.
To the 16th of August for the main extradition application judgment we heard this morning. The defense asking the court for postponement for several reasons, including to familiarize themselves with the book of pleadings, which they say the state provided them 30 minutes before court proceedings started, and also for oral witnesses on issues that pertain to the same case, saying that they want to discuss the issue of safety for their clients. However, the magistrate, after a short adjournment, came and ruled that the main extradition application should continue. We saw later on in the afternoon State Prosecutor Siyabonga coming up and telling the court that some of the things that are contained in this extradition application include the fact that murder is a serious crime in South Africa, in as much as it's a serious crime in Eswatini. So that is another reason why these suspects should be sent back to South Africa, and also saying that the charges against them in South Africa have not lapsed, so meaning that they still have charges that are pending against them in South Africa. So that is another reason why they should be extradited. And also he mentioned the issue of the cell phones, asking the court to make a ruling or a judgment rather in the case of the cell phones. If we remember correctly, the cell phones were found when the two suspects were detained. Siyabonga was saying, which is the state prosecutor, was saying the court must make a ruling in that regard as to whether or not they should be sent to South African police, to be admitted as part of evidence in this case against Siyabonga and Malusi Ndimande. So those are some of the things that we heard here in court this afternoon. As to whether or not they're going to be extradited, that decision lies with the court, and we're going to hear more on that on the 16th of August.
All right, our legal analyst Elton Hart joins us now via video link to weigh in on this particular matter. Elton, thank you so much for your time. So what do we make then of, the magistrate essentially denying, that further postponements and saying that the main extradition needs to be heard in that courtroom? I mean, we've seen so many of those postponements in court. So I would imagine it is a big blow for these two particular, applicants.
Yes, indeed. So, of course, obviously they try to actually make sure that they are possible not to actually have the application, the merits of the application being heard, and actually then the court will have the option of making a decision, either they go or they stay. So I think now it's the end of the road in the magistrate, because there was a fairly amount of delays, asking for further particulars, asking for this, asking for that. I think everything has been provided to them now, and now we need to get to the gist of the application, which I think now would then assist the South African authorities either to say, okay, extradition has been denied, or it's been granted, and now we can proceed with the actual case down in KwaZulu-Natal.
Let's look at those possible scenarios then, Elton. I mean, judgment on whether the two will be granted extradition is set for August 16. So what are we then likely to see when that date happens and when they go back to court?
Obviously, if the judgment is on 16th of August, and it's now we've got limited access to what's happening in that court, but if they say the judgment is set for that day, obviously then the court will determine a date at which they need to be handed over to the South African authorities. South African authorities would be the South African police, because they need to first arrest them and thereafter then bring them to court. And that is one of the things that the two brothers were saying, that they fear if they're being handed over to the police, that their safety might be jeopardized. But I think by the 16th, if the court comes and says these guys should be extradited based on the application brought by the South African government, then the judge will also, or the magistrate hearing the matter, will set a date for the extradition, because there's also certain protocols that you need to adhere with, depending on the country that you're extraditing people from, to make sure that their safety and their passage is guaranteed, and the court is satisfied that nothing will happen to them.
I don't know how much of our reporters feedback in terms of what transpired in court you heard, but essentially saying that the magistrate spent some time just talking about murder in this particular country, South Africa, saying that we need to expedite this because these two are facing serious charges. Murder is one of those very serious crimes in the country. And also, of course, dismissing the application that was made by the defense, failing on several, matters to prove that one of the accused was, in fact, at the scene during that time. But what do we then make of the comments by the magistrate?
No, indeed, that is comments that's in line with what the South African government also needs to prove in court, to say that these guys are standing trial or is alleged to come and stand trial for a serious charge, and the magistrate needs to take that. And them now actually trying to bring subsidiary applications to actually prolong the process. They just needed to demonstrate to the court that their safety might be jeopardized, and then the court can look at it. Is that overweighing the charge that they're facing, and is there measures that can be put in place to make sure that their safe passage from Eswatini to Durban can be guaranteed, and if there's things can be put in place. And that's why I think the magistrate is also of the view that they are trying to deliberately delay them being, and that's why he sort of half cut the leash short now to say, listen, yeah, by 16, this is what's going to happen, and we should not be busy ventilating side issues that is actually issues for the main trial to come and determine if you were at the vicinity of where this crime was committed or not. That's not for this court to decide. That is for the trial court to decide, and not for the extradition court. The extradition court looks at what is you are being charged with, what are they requesting, are they meeting the protocols, and is your safety guaranteed? That's more or less where they would be looking at, and not the merits of the case as you were involved in the commission of the crime or not.
Now, let's look at the case in South Africa. Should the brothers, of course, be extradited back to the country? And when we look at the main case, I mean, we've got 5 accused who've been denied bail. They're between the ages of 21 and 36 years old. They've appeared several times at the Durban Magistrates Court, facing several charges, of course, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, unlawful possession of a firearm, unlawful possession of ammunition, and 5 counts of attempted murder. I mean, these are serious charges. What then does this do with these 2 brothers being extradited? They will all, of course, appear together, meaning that 7 suspects will then be appearing in a South African court. Just take us through, Elton, the likely scenarios we're expecting to see there.
Now, obviously, if the extradition order is granted and they now, in the process, they are being brought, handed over to the South African police then arrest them, charge them formally with various charges ranging from murder, possession of firearm, possession of unlicensed firearm, possession of ammunition, and maybe conspiracy to commit murder, or other related charges that can emanate from the offense that led to the death of Forbes and Tibz. Those charges then put to them, and they then arrested and be brought before court within a space of 48 hours after being arrested by the South African authorities on South African ground. And they, on that day, when they appear in court, they will then be read their rights, that they have a right to legal aid, legal representation, and then also the right to apply for bail application. And then the matter can be postponed. If they want to proceed with bail application, they can then postpone the matter for bail application. They can then do their bail application, be it successful or not, and then from there onwards. And obviously, when they are brought to court, they are also being joined to the other 5 police currently, so they will most probably become accused number 6 and 7. And we know from previous reports, they were like saying spotter, shooter. So then they will be put in that order as to how they played their part in, and the state will then have to now provide further particulars if the investigation is completed. And only later on we'll get to now pre-trial stage and then trial. So I foresee that somewhere maybe next year by June we might be starting with this trial, if by the looks of things.
And I suppose that's the hard part, right? Because a lot of, South Africans thought this was going to be almost, if I can use the word, slam dunk case because of, the state leading this detailed evidence in court, particularly following the murders and the arrests. I mean, one would imagine then that, the state had a watertight case, if I can put it that way. So is this the norm? Is this in line with these high-profile cases that this could likely then only start next year sometime?
No, indeed. The problem is that you need to first go through now this whole process of checking first if the accused is going to apply for bail, give them the right to apply for bail. And obviously, I think this matter will then be escalated later on, maybe to the Durban High Court due to the high-profile nature of the case. And then obviously the court's sitting times, one needs to take cognizance of when the court is sitting and when the court is available, because I think because of the intricacies in this case, you would need a number of witnesses to come and prove. And if I take from the Senzo Mayowa case, where you would bring in a cell phone data analyst, you would bring data analysts from the police to show that these guys were in that proximity using cell phone triangulation and these types of, so they need to place them, because it's not clear that one can say from the video footage of the fateful evening when AKA and Tibz was shot, that clear-cut it's these two shooters. So you need to bring a whole host of witnesses to actually link them to the eventual crime, how these things was happened, how it was orchestrated. And that will take some time, and obviously there will be a lot of things that needs to happen with collection of exhibits, making them available to the defense teams, giving the defense teams time to consult, and we know already 5 of them is in custody, and we know it's not so easy to consult with your clients compared to when your client is out on bail. So then all those things and difficulties and also logistical aspects will play a role in actually making sure that we won't see the trial. And I'm looking at, and I'm speaking conservatively, around and about maybe next year, June, we might get to trial, but it might be even later in that year.
Yeah, just given how complex all of these developments are. But Elton, thank you so much for your time. Elton Hart is a legal expert, of course. Judgment on whether the 2 suspects will be granted extradition is set for August 16. And of course, this is in connection with the Keenan, aka Forbes, as well as Tibz Murder.